Nerds International proudly presents.
Welcome to episode 84 of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to pinnacle entertainment savage worlds aimed at beginners and veterans alike. With me today is my nemesis, Paris Conte. Hi, Paris.
Morning, mate. How are you? Nemesis. That's so cool. Which one of us wears the cape, though? Or does the Dr. Evil thing where he puts his little finger up to his mouth?
Well,
$1 million.
We could split it, and you can have the cape. I don't care too much for the capes because it comes with tights usually. So,
well, tights I could do. Just capes, dangerous, man. Don't do capes.
No, I mentioned Nemesis because, recently you were on Gaming with Gage. Well, we had Gage on the show a couple episodes back, and you were a guest on the show talking about, what you do and your background and how you got to where you are today. And, you guys did mention our, I wouldn't say animosity, but, rivalry maybe, which I don't think it's really founded. I think just as much as you think that you're kind of misunderstood, I think I am too. So it was just a joke.
No, I guess the highlight point out of that is that differing point of views are not only valid, they're needed. Because if you're like me, if I look at everything through just my own lens, I'll miss a lot of stuff. And I am on record as saying that a lot of the stuff that you've shared has gone on to help us in our program. And there's nothing wrong with not agreeing. It's just how you disagree is the way that it's done. Yeah, and again, like as I said, with that lens is, and when we look at it from all these different perspectives, then we start to get a clearer picture of how gaming works and where it works well in different settings, different situations.
Yeah, I think from the get-go when I was given the reins of this show, I wanted different point of views. Often with Savage Worlds, the podcast community, it seems like I don't know. People seem to be on the same opinion about certain things, and I like to hear different point of views, even if they're wrong. So yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes for Gaming with Gages. It was a very good interview. If you're a big fan of Paris, you should check it out. I mean, at first I was like, well, wait a minute. Paris talked about Gen U on the Wild Eye. We had a whole episode about it. But still, with that episode, I still learn new things about you, about all the jobs that you've held, especially with Xbox and marketing and all that stuff. That's pretty impressive. So,
I don't know about impressive. It's still a real whirlwind. I at the moment I seem to be in this real sort of talk about me at the moment. Like I'm doing a lot of presentations to various organizations, but the best way to explain to people that don't know gaming, I'm sort of talking in the professional sense here, is to explain what it meant to me and how it helped me on my journey and how I got to this point to create Gamer. So I'm very subconscious at the moment because I do find myself talking about me a lot lately, which is very weird. But and Gage was a gracious host. I think there must have been about 8 to 10 times all the way through it. I'm like, dude, I'm doing all the talking. Like, isn't this your show? Do you want me to shut up now? So, do you want to say something? He's like, no, just keep talking. This is good. So I'm like, okay. But I've said this to the Wild Eye when I was brought in as a guest in the beginning. I've said it to a couple of other podcasts that I really respect, and that is that these sort of shows, they have this amazing impact out in the community around the world. for at the time when I was listening to a lot of podcasts originally, when I was working alone, it was like being in a conversation with friends. Like, even though I couldn't sort of interact, I was listening to people, and I was getting different viewpoints. I was getting all different stuff that helped me with my games or whatever I was getting through. And the sharing of information, like the story that I've given on the Wild Diet, and then with Gage about the one with the kids in the tavern drinking soup. Now, I didn't create the soup scenario. That, I think I saw that from Games to Grow. They did a video for PAX or something, but I used it because it's worked so well with the age group I was working in, and was almost an identical, not identical situation, it was slightly different. But the beauty is that we share all this information. Like, I talk about Benny Monsters, and then I get a message back saying, "Dude, we're doing Benny Monsters in our group, and it's working out great." And I'm like, "Yes, that's awesome." And the beauty about what podcasts like The Wild I Do and others that I've sort of mentioned is that sharing of information. It's not just interesting, but it really enriches the gaming experience, and dare I say it, sometimes the lives of a lot of other people. Because there are, whether it's people that want to learn more about GMing or how to create content, how to appeal to their players better. But there are people out there that would love to get into gaming but just can't find a group or whatever. And listening to let's say you and Gary talking about a game that you played with Jay or something, it just gives people that sense of belonging and that feeling, and it's really cool. And for all podcasters out there that might be listening, don't underestimate what your show does to people. That's not big noting us, not big noting you guys, but the beauty of this connection, it's just so personal. Podcasting is so personal, even though we're broadcasting it out there, because it's such specific interest and it appeals so much. The people that listen, they get a lot more than we think, and that's just awesome, just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, good thing. I hope our listeners find value in that. Obviously, we have some listeners. We don't get to hear from all of them very often. So if you're shy, please don't hesitate. thewildeye@gmail.com. We always like to hear from you. Another bit of feedback from last show. So it seems like I goofed up. I made a little mistake in assuming that the gear cards that I talked about on last episode that were released, the digital ones were released recently. I thought they would be part of the essential box, but apparently, yeah, I was mistaken because it was just meant to be digital, which is unfortunate. That would have made a great addition to the essentials box, but yeah, don't be mad at Peg if you don't have gear cards in your essential box because of me. I just screwed up.
Got this image of a whole bunch of angry people with pitchforks and torches go, Eric said, give me my cards.
That's right. I mean, there was just so many stretch goals in this Kickstarter that, I just didn't double check my sources on this. But speaking of which, the essentials, a lot of people have received their box or their books. I received mine yesterday, actually. I think we're going to wait till all of the co-hosts have received theirs. I think Gary should be next. He might have it already, but as you probably noticed, he's not here today. He's out on a short holiday, fishing and hunting with some buddies, so can't be with us. And then next should be Harrison, coming back this month, hopefully, and he should be getting his box soon as well. And Paris, he said by Christmas. So once we've all received it, we can have a short segment about it, maybe a whole episode. We'll see. Depends on how much we have to say about it. I'm quite pleased with what I received. There's a couple things that I was a bit disappointed in, but overall, I mean, It's gorgeous, especially the collector's edition book. I mean,
calm down.
oh my God.
I did have my little jokey rant on the Facebook group about how no one was allowed to look at their books until Australia got theirs, or we were going to launch combat wombats at you. But looking at those photo updates from Shane and Jody and Shane, they went all out. Like I don't know how many books they signed in that one sitting, but I was getting tired just looking at the photo, let alone what they went through to get it done. So they obviously have done the best they can to get these products out there as quick as possible. And the beauty is, as you said earlier before the cast, like we've had our PDFs. It's not like we're not being able to play SWADE until the stuff arrives. So we just have to wait. Patience is not something that I am known for, but I'll get there. It's a learning experience for us all.
It's worth it, if anything. Oh. So let's move on to a little bit of news.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the news. The news is incoming. Prepare yourself for the news. News! And some announcements about the Nerds International Network and the Wild Die podcast.
So a couple episodes back, we had Dylan Brooks and Gage Verano on the show to talk about swag, and turns out they were hinting at a special products they were going to put out. So the Discord group got together and released a bundle. I think it's 15 products in a bundle. Well, for me, it was rather cheap, because if you've already purchased some of the products in the bundle, they're deducted from the total. So I think it's maybe $12 something, $12.89 US, something like that. For me,
712 Australian.
Yeah. So I think for me it was like $6 or something like that. But you get adventures, you get new mechanics, setting rules. You get a countdown deck from Richard. Character sheet, form fillable character sheet for fantasy in there. It's basically a big sample of what you can find in swag. So highly recommended. It's a great value. So let's help these guys make more money so they can release more great content like that. I haven't had a chance to look at everything that I got, but very good stuff.
Yeah, it's got manuals, fast lane hacking, and what was that other thing that he put in there?
Distant
journeys. Yeah, look, everything in there is. I already bought most of what was in there already, so there wasn't. I missed out on the saving, but it's definitely worth your time. It's a great bundle of stuff. Yeah. Ooh, Operation Fool. I don't know what that is. What's that? I'll grab that.
Good stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, people have been receiving their Essentials box and their book. Friend of the show, part of the network, Nerds International Network, Matthew Jones from Imaginary Ramblings, gave his impressions on the Essentials box. So I'll put a link to the episode. It's short, less than 20 minutes, so you get to know what he thinks about it. Very good episode. And now the show. Yeah, usually Gary just asks me straight up what the show is going to be about. So today we're going to talk about 7 Worlds. We started this trend a few episodes back when we started looking at the settings where we invited creators to talk about their Kickstarter. Back then, they were still promoting their Kickstarter, so I decided, well, I thought it was a good idea to go back to those settings now that they were fulfilled, that they were out, and we could see, how they fared. Is it good? What they do about it? So, we did Titan Effect. We did Paris did the Zombie Squad. Gary did Buccaneers. And then, now today we're going to do Seven Worlds. I got to read that book. We're going to talk about it. And yeah, you guys are going to find out what I think about it pretty soon. So let's get between the covers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, one and all, to Between the Covers, the hottest and most greased up segment on this podcast. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, things are gonna get a bit weird in here.
No, it's nothing sexy.
Sorry, what?
It's kind of where we talk about a Savage Worlds book from cover to cover.
Like some sort of book club.
Well, essentially, yes.
Well, in that case, I'm leaving. Oh, yeah. See you later.
So usually with reviews, I like to stick to something very, as objective as possible with the reviews, especially when I do it, because I feel there's some kind of conflict of interest with me, publishing some stuff myself. So I always feel a bit awkward reviewing material from one of my, I wouldn't say coworkers, but you don't want to say something that, yeah. So, but look, the previous review by Gary, I really liked the way he approached it. I liked his angle on Buccaneers. It was refreshing, interesting, and caused a lot of people to respond to it. Basically, what Gary did was explain, this is where I'm coming from, and I don't like this because of that, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna take his angle on things for this review. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a review. I want this to be kind of my journey through this book, Seven Worlds. Another reason I wanted to do it like this is because there's just too much material in this book to do it justice by going chapter by chapter and highlighting certain things. Another reason is now that SWADE is out, and this book was released when it was still deluxe. Granted, there is a free conversion document on their website that updates it to SWADE, but I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to accurately judge a book release for deluxe now that SWADE is out, and it might also be a bit confusing to people, especially when we get to talk about some mechanics, because granted, I think some changes are really minor, but it just becomes awkward. So that's one more reason I wanted to do it that way. The last reason is because Paris is a big fan of sci-fi. He's played Traveler. He's got a bunch of sci-fi games back there on his bookshelf that I've seen. So he knows it better than I do, and I wanted to bounce some ideas off of him. So
Cool.
Let's get to it. Basically, let's just go over what Seven Worlds is a little bit, and what you can find in this book. It's a sci-fi setting for Savage Worlds, and I would say that it's kind of a space exploration and colonization game in a sense where it's humanity in space. You're not going to find, well, there are aliens, but they're not playable races in this game. It's all about humanity and how they deal with settling on different planets and what happens there. This is a 216 pages book. So like I said, a lot of material, gorgeous cover by Aaron Riley, who's illustrated a lot of material for Lankmar for Pinnacle and also Flash Gordon. So it's gorgeous cover. Basically, half the book is all fluff. It's just information about the world, background, how we came to colonize space, space travel, theories, that sort of thing. The other 100 pages is new edges, hindrances, skills, weapons, setting rules, and a pretty big bestiary in there, and a sample of, several spaceships as well. Now for the adventure, you get the first adventure from the campaign, but the campaign is actually in another book. Now, Lewis was gracious enough to send us copies of the PDFs for both, but I didn't have time to read the other one, and this is just about the 7 worlds setting guide. The campaign guide is the one where you get a mega campaign in there, so a lot of material for it to read. I will say...
Sorry, just to interrupt there, Eric. That so I backed the Kickstarter for this, and a lot of it came in over a period of time. So is that document you're talking about, is that like the 7 or 8 adventures
Yes.
that you got, and it's all combined now in one document, is it?
Yep, compiled into one book. Wow, so
that'd be cool. All right.
Yep. So I would say this was a hard book for me to read. Most of the reasons aren't really... I wouldn't blame the book itself for it. It's just me being really busy and easily distracted, especially when I get more books delivered at home or I buy more PDFs. But it is dense in the sense that we're talking about sci-fi here. A lot of facts, a lot of scientific facts in there. Basically, almost every other page you have a sidebar explaining the science behind every new mechanic or every aspect. So, for example, you start with the history and how the circle, which is basically like NASA, how they came into existence, and then there was a big cataclysm on Earth where the whole of humanity had to escape and go live on other planets that were discovered, but they explain the science behind the logistics behind how do you get like millions of people off a planet and into a spaceship and then travel light years away to another world. And let's back this up a little bit. So I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I like to watch movies about sci-fi. Sci-fi movies of any kind. I'm a big fan of Riddick, movies like Alien, pretty much anything, even the more brainy kind like Interstellar and these type of movies. I love them, but when it comes to gaming, I don't know. I'm more of a like science fantasy type of guy. Space opera. Give me Star Wars any day. I've been on Jamie Pearson's show where when you're a guest, he asks you to choose between Star Wars or Star Trek. Which one is your favorite? And I pick Star Wars. Star Trek doesn't appeal to me at all. But I like the idea of, you know, a bunch of different alien races that are basically just humans, but with prosthetics, because they're almost all of them just are really human-like. But then again, you could say the same thing about Star Trek. But if you look at chases or dogfights in space, it's always in asteroid field or spaceship graveyard, and there's lots of obstacles and things like that. It's basically just fantasy in space. That I can dig, that I can do. But when it comes with this book, Seven Worlds, when he had Lewis on the show, I thought it was a great interview, but what I got from this is that it was more, while you explain it as a hard sci-fi flavored soft sci-fi, and I don't know, I fail to see the appeal of gaming into something so brainy like that. So I don't know, maybe you could provide a little bit of commentary here.
So
what's the appeal of a more hard sci-fi RPG?
I'll give you why I think people like hard sci-fi RPGs, or certain people like it. So I think hard sci-fi and even science fiction in general is more niche than fantasy. Fantasy has the widest appeal base. And I think a big part of that is because technology ages. So if you have a look at, let's say, the original Traveller, Star Frontiers, a lot of those sci-fi games that came out in the early 80s, they're very dated now. Like if you go to play them now, you've essentially got to read something new because the technology is always changing. Whereas fantasy is kind of a fixed point in history. We all know where fantasy is. But I think the main reason that people enjoy sci-fi that leads more towards scientific science fiction, so your Star Treks, your Traveller, etc., is because it's a way of exploring the possible futures. So you just take the possible future of humanity. So it's more of a philosophical trip, if you will. So if you take even this setting and the whole concept of having to leave our Earth, and how would we achieve that? That is a very topical thing right now. We're talking about climate change and the concerns that the planet is no longer going to be able to sustain us because we've been butt heads to it. And so these questions are starting to come up. But you're right. Whenever you get into a hard sci-fi game of any kind, doesn't matter whether it's this or any of them, there is a lot that you have to digest. Star Trek versus Star Wars, for instance, if you're going to take those two role-playing settings, and they're both very popular. Star Trek, I can go into it with a fantasy mind. You know, there's some magic with the Jedi, and they fight with swords. Everyone else has guns. You've got bad guys versus good guys. That's it. Pretty straightforward. I don't need to know a great deal more than that. I don't have to worry about what it actually takes to make a ship fly from one side of the galaxy to the other. I don't have to worry about inertia. I don't have to worry about mass. I don't have to worry about any of that crap. It just happens. Whereas when you're dealing with a game like Traveller, or like this, for instance, where you actually have to understand the realities of spaceflight and what that means, and how you can't do the things that you see in a lot of TV shows or movies. People like to explore that, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. And one of the things that when I looked at when this was first introduced to me, and I got really excited by it, and I backed the Kickstarter, but there was always this voice in the back of my head that went, wait, how do I do a setting, a science fiction setting that has so much real world science in it in Savage Worlds? Because Savage Worlds is very cinematic. It's very loose. It's very on the fly. We don't really worry about reality in most instances. We just worry about how cool the scene is and how much fun everyone has at the table. That doesn't invalidate either the system or this setting in any way. They're just for a very select market. And so while I absolutely love this product, I haven't had a chance to play it, and I will likely never play it at work, and I will have a hard time playing it in private because I have to find the right players for it. They have to be that invested in wanting to play a game. I have to find some of my old Traveller mates is essentially what I have to do. And then, of course, the first question they'll ask me is, Paris, why would I play this when we've got Traveller? So that's it. But that doesn't discount what this particular product can do, in the sense that if I was to hand this to a young kid who has an interest in science, and they have a chance to play a game like this with a rule set that doesn't get in the way like Savage Worlds does, with a lot of this science, like I'm just looking at the page with the space elevator on it, and that is something that we're currently researching, and something that we want to figure out how to do a geosynchronous orbit base that actually connects to the planet, so that we can just go up and down the elevator and jump on out. These kinds of products, they fill the imagination of people that are looking to the future. It's like how Star Wars got people into science. This is that sort of product, and that's its appeal. And this, by the way, is a beautifully laid out book. You're right; it is dense with information. It's not something you can skim through because you just can't grab everything that he's trying to portray with this setting. You as a GM, there's a lot of work to make this game happen. But I think if you find the right GM and the right players, this would be an absolutely magic setting to watch and play.
Yeah, I would agree. I started reading this book. Everybody I knew were saying good things about this setting. So even though this isn't really my cup of tea, I still dug in, and it starts right off the bat with the introduction. That's where I don't know. Maybe I got confused a little bit because, excuse me, I got the impression from the interview with Lewis that this was going to be the most hard sci-fi setting for Savage Worlds that you can get. I mean, compared to Last Parsec and even Nemesis and High Space, we've covered a bunch of them. But right off the bat, he says this is space opera with hard sci-fi flavor, and then he says it's soft sci-fi with hard sci-fi flavor. So, which is it? And then you start reading, and you understand what he's talking about, which is he'll take you on every step of the way of what happened. Like I said, there's a lot of material in there, and I'm not going to talk about all of it, but basically an alien species contacted humankind and gave them coordinates to other worlds. Meanwhile, there was the Circle, I can't think of his name right now, but a really brilliant mind who figured out how to travel through space using helium-3, which is a gas that allows faster than light travel. But you've got a map as big as space. You don't know where to go. They could explore all they want, but they could go hundreds of years in a direction and never find a world. But that alien species gave them coordinates to a world that they could colonize, so they started doing that. And then so they explain the science, like I said, with sidebars about everything. And then it gets to the point where they talk about the spaceship. because it's a big part of this setting, both in the fluff part, so the front half of the book, and then later on in the second half with the setting rules. And this is where my feelings about hard sci-fi were kind of reinforced, in the sense that when I think of exciting spaceship battles, I think of Star Wars, of course, Millennium Falcon, exciting cinematic sequences and fighters, TIE fighters, and that type of combat, and what these spaceship have that I like, that I think is sexy, is the shape of them, which is very aerodynamic. But then in this book, you get a big sidebar about how it doesn't make sense at all to have aerodynamic spaceships in space, because there's no atmosphere, so you don't have to fight against that at all. It just weakens the structure of a ship to have something like the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah. So I think first of all, it's going back to how the author has tried to categorize his book or his work, and he must have struggled so much with coming up with a definition. So first of all, what we need to understand is that when we label books with a genre, whether it's fantasy, science fantasy, hard science fiction, blah, that was made up by publishers just so they could try to categorize things and to try and attract customers to a particular thing. So while I know that there's a lot of people that have been arguing, or not arguing, but they've been saying that certain things don't belong in hard sci-fi, and if it has this, it becomes science fantasy or space opera. The fact is, the lines between all of those are so blurred, it's very hard to put down. And if you look at Star Wars, from a science point of view, you could go on the record and say Star Wars is just fantasy. Yes, it has robots. Yes, it has spaceships. Yes, it has laser guns. But science has nothing to do with that story. In terms of, it doesn't come up. It's not something they talk about. They in the beginning, which they had to correct with the Solo movie, they used distance for time when they were referring to how fast it was to the Millennium Falcon broke a record and all this sort of stuff. So, the combat in that movie is based on World War II fighters. So within an atmosphere and all the rest of it, but that doesn't make Star Wars a bad movie. It doesn't negate it from being a science fiction show either, because it inspired generations upon generations of people to create or join or do science, study science, and create things. And that's the beauty of any game that we play. It should be there to inflame our imagination and make us ponder and wonder what could be, whether that's magic or science. So what I believe this author has tried to do is he's tried to create a Traveller-style game. Not saying he's copying Traveller in any way, but he's trying to create a Traveller-style game for the Savage Worlds rule set. I think he's done an amazing job, but the problem with that is it comes with the same thing that Traveller suffers from, and that is you have to put so much information in there so that the people playing the game understand how to play it properly. If science could be done on a one sheet, all of us would be, chemical engineers and nuclear scientists, that kind of thing.
Players don't read, but
players don't read, and with us poor GMs now, which seems to be just the way of modern life. It's difficult to get this into it.
No, it's like I was reading that part about the spaceships, and it made sense. But then he goes on to explain what would make sense for the shape of a spaceship in real science fiction and hard sci-fi. And what he came up with is either a cylinder or a sphere. So I was imagining a volleyball or a disco ball in space, and now I'm the captain of the disco ball, and I don't know. It doesn't have the same effect on me as a sleek design, as a sexy spaceship like the Millennium Falcon, or even in Star Trek Voyager or Enterprise, it's still better looking than just a sphere, a ball just floating around in space. So this was kind of, like I said, I was going to talk about my journey through this book, and this is the first time where I'm like, I'm not sure about this. It makes sense. It's totally logical to use this shape because it's stronger. But then he goes on to talk about what the life inside of such a spaceship would be like, and that there's no gravity, but then you would be wearing suits with magnetized suits, where it would kind of guide you through this ship. And then there's a section of the ship where it would have gravity, because every once in a while you would have to go work out in this environment just so that your muscles don't atrophy, and you just break apart, and you would have to talk to shrinks to see how you're coping with life like that. And then I'm like, so these spaceships can travel faster than light. They're as big as cities, yet they couldn't figure out a way to have a simulated, gravity on this ship. And this doesn't get addressed in the book, or at least I don't remember. I could say that maybe it's a question of the amount of power that it would require to do this. But, in more softer sci-fi, you usually see it as part of the spaceship is kind of rotating.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, or at least so what he's done is he's presented a form of space travel which would fit in our current understanding of science, which is awesome. The problem that I guess we have as now, because we're looking at this as gamers and as GMs, is how do I role play that? Or how do I tell my players that we're going to play a sci-fi game, but there'll be no sci-fi, there'll be no spaceship combat, because in reality, combat in space is the dumbest thing you could do. Right? It's so dangerous. It takes one breach of the hull, everybody dead. You haven't got the maneuverability that you have when you think you have out in space, like because you watch Star Wars. So if we take the science element out of my thinking, if I go, all right, all this is really cool because it appeals to my philosophical brain, but then I look at it from my purely game master's brain and I go, how would I sell that to my players? How do I go, let's play this game where we are going to have to hand wave the travel? So would you agree with that? So essentially this game to be played will be all planet side predominantly.
Well, actually, a lot of it gets addressed as you keep reading when it comes to space travel. It's handled quite... I would say in a fast, fun, and furious way for space travel, and even space combat that I'll get to later. But what I meant by that is that, let's say my group hasn't read Seven Worlds, and I say they're on their spaceship, and there's an emergency, and they say, "Well, I just walk over to the bridge," and I'm like, "No, wait, you can't walk. There's no gravity there. You have to float toward it, and your suit, your magnetized suit, will help guide you through it." And then also doors. There's a big section just on doors in this book where they explain that basically every part of the ship is sentient. It's all computerized, where if you because there's an ID tag on you, if you approach a door, if you have access through that door automatically opens. You don't need a door handle. Also, if you're not allowed to, you just can't get through. If there are people on the other side of that door, and you're trying to listen to the door, to what they're saying, the AI on the spaceship will just alert the people inside and say, "Hey, there's someone trying to eavesdrop on you, right outside." Or it could be just that the door now, instead of being line of sight blocking, is just like a glass. And now you can see through it. And every part of a spaceship is kind of like that, where you could get boarded, or maybe you do something on board that you're not supposed to. Now, all of a sudden, the spaceship itself can just glue you onto the wall, because your suit is magnetized and you're stuck there. And all these things were amazing for me to read. I loved reading that part, but the problem I had with that, like you said, is as a GM, is the players, unless they've read the book, they're not expecting that. They're not thinking that way. And it's like every natural instinct that comes with role playing in a certain environment are now, while it's like that moment where the total nerd will just push up their glasses and say, "Well, actually, you can't do that." And I just feel that a session of running that would be a bunch of that in there. Well, actually, you can't open the door because you don't have access to it. You know what I'm saying?
It seems to take away a lot of player agency, I guess, is what we're talking about here. Because especially if you haven't read the book, or you're not experienced with this kind of science fiction, and you go, right, we're getting boarded, I draw my gun, I get ready, I run down the corridor. You go, well, actually, no, it doesn't work that way. There's no gravity, there's this, and this. I can see a situation where your players are going to go, well, this is crap, I can't do anything. All right, because they're all in their heads, they're thinking aliens, running around shooting bugs with machine guns, or Star Wars chasing down stormtroopers, that kind of thing. You're right. It is a very different game, which is why I sort of mentioned it's brilliant for a particular group of players. I'll save my other comments to near the end, but yeah, I understand that much science, or that much reality in a game, especially a Savage Worlds game, could be difficult to translate to get your players to engage with. I can certainly see that.
I mean, granted, he does say later on in the book that it is a game, and if anything gets in the way of your fun, you should just discard it. But then again, that I believe this is the case with any RPG. So we're going for what's actually in the book. Something else is the Callborn shield, which is okay. So on a ship during battle, the Callborn shield will protect you from damage, but it will also protect you from radiation because of the engines, and also will help radiate heat out of the shield, because heat is a big part of spaceship combat. So, but on the same page where the author explains this shield, he also has a big sidebar that explains that this wouldn't really be possible. It would require so much energy that within the realm of, scientific realm, I would say, realistic, a Callborn shield it isn't something that you would see. So like I said, this is my journey through the book. I started with the introduction saying it was going to be soft sci-fi with hard sci-fi element. And then when I got to that part, my thinking behind it was like, okay, you just explain how cool the Colborne shield is, and an intricate part of the setting and of spaceships. But on the same page, he tells me that it's not possible. It's not hard sci-fi. So there was like this contradiction where, so I'm just confused. Is he just really honest about it, or is he just playing with me? So,
I obviously can't speak for the author himself, but I mean, there are many things that, our NASA is looking at so many ways to travel the stars, and how do we take humanity to the stars and colonize planets and do all these things, and having to deal with the heat and the radiation and all that sort of thing, even outside of space combat, is something that they have to factor in. So when the author of a science fiction novel or a science fiction setting has to put in those elements that don't exist at the moment, there has to be a certain leeway, to make it happen. Because if there were no shields, you couldn't do space combat in this game. So I think he's just saying, look, this is ideally how it happened, with how it could work with our current understanding of science. Right now, we have no way of creating the shield. We have no way of powering that shield, because it would require too much energy output to be feasible. But if we could, this is something like it might look like. And for the purposes of this setting, that's how we're going to use it. Which to me doesn't invalidate what he said either, because I always look at science fiction in that light. It's like, what could be possible? We don't know it yet, but if it makes logical sense, even if it's not real right now, do you know what I mean? Like, if your brain sort of goes, oh yeah, I can see that. I don't know how it's going to work, but I can see that being a logical answer to the problem. Then it fits. It just sort of go, yeah, okay, I get it. And as long as you can work with that, I mean, if we can work with a game where a person can generate a huge fireball from nothing, I know we sort of go, well, hang on a minute, then it's not science fiction anymore. It's certainly not hard science fiction. But you take something like Star Trek, like, we suspend belief when they talk about tachyons with everything, and warp drives the way they do it. It's just not feasible, right? But we look at Star Trek as a more hard sci-fi than Star Wars, and yet they're both using, in terms of space travel, they're both using technology that's just not even feasible, at least not with our current understanding of physics and the natural world. So, I don't feel it invalidates what he's done. I think he's given a great explanation as to how it could theoretically work within this setting, how it could theoretically work if we could generate enough energy. And within this setting, let's just say we have enough energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I guess where I'm coming from with that part is that for me, it was the first instance in the book where everything leading up to it felt like it was consistent with what he was trying to do when it comes to hard sci-fi. But at this point, I was like, wait a minute, are you contradicting yourself? And I asked myself that question, and it's something I want to ask you and Gary. Unfortunately, he's not there. But where do you draw the line of, this setting feels enough hard sci-fi for me, but this one doesn't, And I understand, like you just explained, that the author had to make, he had to make the call. He had to fill in this part and add the shield to it so that he could have spaceship combat later. And I guess we're going to get to all the comments from people, but I just wanted to quote someone here, Dylan Brooks, that says, really hard sci-fi is often not very fun or gameable. Yeah, that would be something like 2001, Alien, Contact, or Interstellar. Psionics are generally not appropriate in that kind of game since they don't have much, if any, basis in science. And I'll get to psionics later because he was answering one of my questions if people considered psionics a part of hard sci-fi, and there are psionics in this setting. So would you say that the author actually made those calls because, would you agree with Dylan that a really 100% hard sci-fi setting wouldn't really work? Wouldn't be fun?
No. Yeah, it'd be boring. In the sense, like, let's say we were going to have a role-playing game or a role-playing session based around Apollo 13, all right, which has this really exciting moment when the ship, everything goes to shit and they have to turn around and go home, right? But there are days and days and days and weeks of nothing, just checking equipment, looking around, walking up and down, having a conversation, making sure your muscles don't atrophy. Who wants to role-play that? Right? That's just boring as hell. But you can have a great one-shot about what happens when your starship, in a hard sci-fi situation, when your starship fails and you've got to quickly get between decks to do things. But then again, ultimately what you do is you'd probably do a couple of engineer roles, and that's it. Hard science it's very interesting, and it's great if you are a scientist and that's what intrigues you. But at the heart of every genre that we play within a role-playing game is story. If there's no story, there's no vehicle to tell, to ponder, or there's no platform for the dialogue, there's no platform for the drama. And unfortunately, hard science is not dramatic. It is boring, it is factual, it is calculating. And so what I feel that the author's done with this setting is he wanted to create a game that brought in more of the realistic elements of science fiction. But I think he either got to a point, or he decided to do this from the outset, but he got to that point where he realized all this hard science is not going to make a fun game. I have to be able to adapt what I know or adjust what I know so that the player goes, this game is fun. This setting is fun. I can do trade. I can transport. I can explore new worlds. All this sort of stuff. And unfortunately, under real science conditions, exploring a new world would be a long, tedious, boring task of protocol. Check and recheck and double check. And is this packed? And are we ready to do this? We'll be down there for like you do like a month's worth of prep for 10 minutes worth of searching of a planet. It just isn't. In a game sense, we just go, no, that's just not happening. It's just not going to happen. But I applaud him. What I applaud him for doing this is he's expanded the boundaries of science fiction within Savage Worlds gaming. So whether you play Seven Worlds straight as it is, or you mine it for stuff for your Last Parsec game or other science fiction games, you and I will both look at this setting and go, this doesn't work for me because I don't have the time or it doesn't interest me. And I'll look at it and go, well, I love what he's done. I just don't have the time to do all this, and it wouldn't work at all in my workspace. And even in my private games, I'd have a hard time. Maybe 1-2 players I can think of off the top of my head that would be in it. And then I have to think about, well, would I enjoy that game as the GM? Because even though I'm exploring all those science concepts that I love, do I really want to put that much detail into my game? And is that going to affect the storytelling? But when I look at the setting and I look at the key characters that created the whole organization, right? The first thing I think of is the Legion of Superheroes. I don't know if you know the history of them, but that sort of starts with 3 core teenagers, and then the Legion is born. So I'm like, oh, this is exciting because I've attached it to that concept. Yeah. And I love lots of elements that he's presented in this, and I go, yeah, I could change this part of my starship combat within my setting to allow for this, and this, and it's going to make the starship combat less cinematic and maybe a little more gritty, Do you know what I mean? Like I'm going, yeah, I can take that and I can take that. And like as a background read, if you're into this sort of genre, you'll love it. It's fantastically put together. I see but when we look at it from a GM's lens and we go, well, wait, how do I make that work in a game? Or did he just contradict himself? I do see what you're talking about.
Yeah. The next thing that I read that I sort of had a problem with, but then again, I understand where he's coming from, is where with spaceship combats using chase rules. So like I mentioned, this was written for deluxe, so using the deluxe chase rules. He goes on a lot about explaining how the space is so vast and with no obstacle for, hundreds of millions of kilometers in between ships that can see each other from that distance. And in fact, some of their weapons, I think, can reach 300 million kilometers, the lasers from their spaceship. So you can have a battle between two ships that are just that far apart, with nothing in between. So you can't think of it in the sense of having obstacles in between. And so he talks about the chase rules in deluxe that aren't really fitting for that because they're too abstract. But then again, he talks about the fact that it's a battle with 3 dimension, and even in the deluxe rules, the dogfights, they're about 3-dimensional battles because they're in the air and all that. But yet for this setting in deluxe, he basically goes back to the chase rules in Explorers Edition, which uses a tracker 1 through 10. But now we're with SWADE, and it basically uses that. So what I'm trying to say is that I got confused, or maybe I thought it was silly a little bit, because he's talking about a 3-dimensional environment, but yet he's using a 1 through 10 unit to determine where everybody is placed. And this would be just a 2-dimensional tracker. But then you look at how it works, how space combat actually works. And one of the main elements of that is the distance between the ships. Because instead of, like, the pilot isn't really all that important anymore. You can evade missiles, but it's still the same rules as Savage Worlds, and it's a -6 to your piloting roll to evade missiles, which is crazy. But so instead of looking at spaceship combat as the Millennium Falcon or TIE fighters fighting each other, what you're looking at, and at first I was kind of not hesitant, but I was like, no, it doesn't look cool at all. It's just 2 balls in the space and they're just blasting each other. How fun could that be? But he goes on to explain all the different kind of weapons that you can use against each other, all the different defenses that you use, the role of the engineer, the Colborn shield engineer in particular, and then all the gunners. So basically, you can shoot lasers that come real fast, but then you're using your shield. You can boost your shield. The engineer can do that and gain a soak roll, or you can gain the deflection, or armor, which is now protection power. But also, if people shoot missiles at you, you can just shoot them before they get to you, because you got a countdown. You can have like 4 or 5 rounds before those missiles get to you because they're slower. So it becomes a different dynamic entirely, which I think is pretty cool. It's not what I'm used to, but when you look at traditional Star Wars kind of fight, it's basically just a pilot doing everything and everybody's in the ship and just hoping they survive. Maybe there's a gunner or two and these guys get to have fun, but there's nothing else to do. But now you're looking at spaceship combat totally differently, because the engineer is probably a guy who's got the most to do there, the most decisions. If you're going to shoot something out of your ship, you have to take down the shield. If you take down the shield, then you're more vulnerable. So, what do you do? If you shoot your laser, you're going to add heat onto your ship. If that heat is not radiated out by the end of the round, you gain fatigue to your ship. If your ship is incapacitated because of fatigue, all the systems go down and you're just a sitting duck out there. So, and this goes on for like in 3 different sections in the book, and especially the setting rules, where you don't get the excitement, the cinematic feel to it, but I would imagine that it would be fun around the table to make the decision: are we radiating out the heat this round and putting their shield down? What are they going to shoot at us? How do we defend? Because you've got different types of weapons. You can even expel a minefield out, so that if they're trying to shoot you, the missiles will just hit the minefields and all that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that in terms of what I was saying about mining for stuff for your own game. So this, I don't think even the Star Wars role-playing games that I've played, capital ship combat or larger ship combat is never really addressed well, I don't think. At least not cinematic or interesting. And I got a real sort of Hunt for Red October feel when I look at this kind of combat. I get a real, that how submarines would attack underwater, where there's a lot of, we've got to keep things between us and them, so trying to stay around planets, that kind of thing. Run silent, run deep, so they don't pick you up, and you surprise attack would have to be a big thing. But once the two ships have sort of drawn their battle lines and things are flying out, if I can imagine a good GM, sort of explaining the klaxons going off and lights flashing and instrument panels screaming warnings, and you're looking at your radar and or whatever sensors you're looking at, and you can see the streak of missiles coming, and one player's got to be manning those anti-aircraft guns, essentially whatever the version would be in space. Someone else would have to be manning the shields, as you said. If a missile gets through, all of a sudden someone's got to run in and patch that hole. Someone's been injured. The medic's got something to do now. The person that actually invested points in leadership skills, they're giving out commands and boosting their morale of the troops and making sure that they're doing their thing. So I can see that as being really exciting and cinematic. You're absolutely correct. You can't have TIE fighters chasing the Millennium Falcon through an asteroid field in this game. Not with this kind of science. It just doesn't work. But then imagine taking that style of combat and maybe turning it into, modern day battleship warfare, which is very similar when you think about it. Not as 3-dimensional, obviously, but you could use that. And so I think with what he's done there, it certainly for me, because again, when you were talking about the pilot thing, and one of the things that we sort of always struggled with in those sort of games, because I've just recently done a Star Wars game, is you can have a scene where the 2 guys that made pilots are having a great time and everyone's sitting there with their thumb up their bum because they can't do anything. Whereas in this game, everyone gets a shot. Everyone gets to do something, and you can keep the game cinematic. So this is very cool.
Yeah, and this is something we even talked about during Buccaneers, where, they added a bunch of rules to include everybody on board the ship, and this goes toward the same thing to me. And I was impressed. It's not what I'm used to. I'm still not sure I would run a game for that, but I think I would join. I think it would be interesting. The next thing and final thing before we slowly wrap this up is the psionics, and I mentioned that earlier. So, like I said, I'm not an expert in any way into sci-fi or hard sci-fi, but the idea of psionics, to me, it just kind of clashes with hard sci-fi. It's basically magic. So I asked people on Facebook, as we prepare for the next episode about 7 worlds, we wanted to ask you listeners if you consider psionics a part of the sci-fi, hard sci-fi genre. And we got pretty divided opinions on this, I would say. Well, there was Daniel Klickner said, personally, I think that psionics pushes a setting towards soft sci-fi, but it doesn't disqualify a setting from being hard sci-fi if the other elements fall into that category. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I actually sit in the camp where psionics are part of hard sci-fi, but did you want to get through some more questions before I explain why, or give you my opinion on that? Because I'm sure everyone will think I'm wrong, and that's cool too. Why do I think psionics can work in the hard sci-fi? So I'm going to have to be a bit philosophical with you here, which of course people are going to go, well, that's not hard sci-fi, Paris. You're talking philosophy. But if we look at human understanding of science, take as little as 120 years ago, we believed categorically, science proved that women couldn't do higher education because their reproductive system required a certain amount of blood, which would be taken away by the brain when they did any sort of hard thinking. And that way their reproductive system would shrivel up and be very bad for the woman, so they shouldn't do higher education. So, of course, if someone was to present that in university today, you'd be scoffed at. 120 years ago, that was accepted as fact. So the thing is that when we look at psionics from this, if we look at it through this lens, we're saying that currently science is saying there is no possible way psionics can happen. The brain, or whatever the brain is, can't develop an ability to affect the natural world just by thought. Yet we don't even know why we sleep. Why do we sleep? Who knows? There's so many things about the brain that we do not understand, and it is not that much of a leap to believe that either humans of the future or alien species that live in different environments than us, possibly living in space where the physical is no longer as important as the mental, that our brains or a alien species brains couldn't evolve to affect reality with the power of thought. I realize that under current scientific thought, I have made a huge leap, an absolutely huge leap there, and it is purely philosophical. But the fact is that when we look at science fiction as an exploration of what could be based on our current understanding of the natural world and mathematics, we hypothesize, we elaborate, we take one thing that we know to be true or currently know to be true, and we expand on that notion, and everything is attached to a what if. I don't care what it is, whether it's the weapons, the technology, the robots, the food we eat, how we're going to breathe, everything is a what if. So if you can go, well, what if the brain does develop to such a way that it can affect the physical world, or at least the brain of another person, and if we can accept that we as human beings do run on empathy and we empathize with others, an evolution of that could be an actual physical response between the two. As it is, we can affect emotions, we can affect the way people think, we can hypnotize people. That's all known. It can be done. As far as I'm concerned, it's not that much of a leap to say that this could happen. So in my opinion, psionics does fit in a hard science fiction setting. And again, we can have the debate about what is a hard science fiction setting, and that could take 400 episodes, so we won't do that.
Well, the definition I found of hard sci-fi is that it's science fiction based on scientific facts. So,
Yeah.
but then again, isn't it projecting what sci-fi will, what science will be in, 50 or 100 years? To me, that's sci-fi. You look at everything that we can do today, and you project that, like you said, a leap of 100 years. It's especially exponentially from the past 100 years or so. It's not that far-fetched. Who said that we only use about 10% of our brain, or maybe that's not right, true, whatever. But what if
I don't know the exact
unlocked?
numbers.
What if we unlocked more? But so Andy Slack here says depends how it's explained. Nanobots growing a radio in your head that can take control of nearby robots. That's hard sci-fi. Learning secret powers to cloud men's minds by staring at them, not hard sci-fi. So,
taking Andy's point, like right now, we have the technology to manipulate prosthetics via thought. That is a possibility for human beings today. So the leap to have some way of controlling robots via some sort of transmitter, certainly not beyond the realms of possibility at all in terms of our current understanding of science. Clouding men's minds, I think we could do that now without staring at them, but just in various techniques of communication. And again, it's all about what if we evolved, what if our environment changes so drastically that we change into something else? It also comes down to what does it mean to be human? There's so many things that are linked to science fiction that we explore. We love all the cool stuff, but ultimately at the end of the day, every science fiction story is a story of what does technology mean to humanity? How will it change us? What will it make us look like in the future? How will it affect our lives? When will technology outpace what we can do evolution-wise or thought-wise, where the thought that computers will be smarter than us or are already smarter than us? I was even reading a report the other day that autism is not an actual disability, but it's actually the human condition trying to evolve into a technologically advanced world. Now, that's a pretty far-fetched theory at this point in time. People will laugh and scoff at that. But at the end of the day, who knows? 100 years' time from now, humanity may all be on the spectrum as we class it today, and because that is the best way to interact with our technology in the future. No, I am not promoting this as an idea, and I'm not saying that's fact or anything. But what I'm saying is we don't know. We do not know. And the beauty of science fiction and the beauty of role-playing games is that we get to say, what if? And if we mark that just enough of it's grounded in something that could be real, and if we can now control prosthetics with thought, right? We've understood enough about the way the electrics of the brain sends impulses down nerves that we can manipulate it with machinery, or we can manipulate machinery with it. The leap from there to what we could do with the brain is almost infinite.
Yeah, the possibilities. What I will say is that in Seven Worlds, basically psionics is explained by its genetics, passed down from mothers to daughters. The gene is passed on, but just having the gene doesn't mean you have powers. Just basically, there's a lot in there that's unexplained. And to me, that's kind of I don't like that word for this, but I would say red flag, saying that it's a soft sci-fi explanation, according to what Andy said, because it's basically, we don't know really what's causing psionics. So to me, it's like saying just magic. So I don't feel that the explanation in Seven Worlds is very scientific and based in science. Now, if we if you keep reading and you have to get to the appendix for this in the book, there's basically a section, a whole appendix that it's entitled. Let me get that for you. It says glaring omissions made to science as we know it. One of them is FTL, faster than light, explaining that right now it's not based on anything scientific. And another one, energy shields, again, like I said, from that sidebar. And lastly, psionic powers. No currently accepted scientific theory supports the existence of psionic or extrasensory mental powers. So the author acknowledges the fact that it's not really hard science to add psionics in that. And then he goes on saying, yeah, it's not hard sci-fi, but we all like magic in our settings. So to me, that's one of maybe of the weak spots of the setting, where he had the opportunity there to give it a really cool hard sci-fi hook, but just went, oh, people just like to have powers, so we'll just put that in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The author is English his first language? I can't remember.
No, he's not, but his English is really good.
Yeah, it's really good. But I'm just wondering if there's sort of like not a translation thing, but I know like my mother's French and my father's Italian, and there'll be things that they'll say using sort of the words that they translated, but it's the words that from their language, and it makes sense. But that's essentially what they're trying to say. Look, the fact of the matter is there are scientists out there that are researching psionics, right? Just because we don't have a theory about, or we don't have a currently working theory, or there's no defined, agreed upon thing, doesn't mean it's not being studied. Cold fusion is a thing that we've been talking about for years and years and years. We can't make it work, but if I was to put cold fusion into a setting, no one's going to say, I'm now doing a soft sci-fi. I'm making a leap. I'm sure there's people yelling at their car radios right now. But I actually disagree with the author here when he says, look, I've put psionics on here and I've made it a soft sci-fi now because I've done that. I wonder if he's felt the need to say that because he feels he needs to justify his initial position that this was going to be a harder science game than other sci-fi settings. I kind of feel that maybe under pressure he hasn't stuck to his guns as hard as he wanted to. And maybe he thought that if he came out and said, look, psionics could be hard sci-fi, that he would cop backlash for it. I'm only speculating here. Personally, if I'd have written this setting and I'd put psionics in it, I would fight to the end of time that psionics, in my time anyway, that psionics fits in a hard sci-fi setting. But as we've seen from many of our responses, I would definitely be in the minority.
Let's read a couple more. From Garrett Weinstein. What makes a setting hard sci-fi is definitely subjective. My feeling with psionics is that no, it does not have enough of a basis in real science to be hard sci-fi. But having psionics in a setting doesn't disqualify it from being considered hard sci-fi either. And for gaming purposes, I'd rather go with what's fun than worry too much about arbitrary genre boundaries. And yeah, I agree.
I think you summed that up really well.
Yep. You want to read? You want to pick another one?
So I pick one. I'm going to go to Uncle J. Uncle J Raz. I've always considered psionics space magic. June started the concept, but not hard sci-fi. No. Did June start it? Wasn't it earlier with the Time Machine? I'm sure there was psionics in there somewhere. Anyway,
I don't know where it started.
Task. Yeah, look, man. Sorry, Uncle Jay, dude. We've spoken a lot lately, but I don't see psionics as space magic. Not at all. I mean, if they were firing fireballs from their eyeballs or something like that, then I'm with you. But I guess because psionics is limited to a specific area, it all gears around what a brain is susceptible to, I guess, is, it's, could we move something with our minds? Well, some people believe you can. Can we throw our thoughts into someone else's mind? Some people think you can. Can we impart an emotion? Can we alter someone's perception by using our brains? The fact is that our brains are what gives us our version of reality. So if one brain evolves to a point where it can alter that in another person, I'm still sitting in sci-fi, not magic. So
Yes.
I agree. I love you, but no.
So maybe it depends on the list, the powers that are available. Maybe it's just reading minds. But then again, I believe in this setting they explain it as manipulating brain waves. So, could you set something on fire by manipulating brain waves? Could you use the blast power, the havoc power? What can you do? So maybe part of the hard sci-fi is, how much of a combat magic is it?
I guess it also comes down to what part of science that you're interested in. So this gentleman is obviously very much interested in technology that revolves around space and that kind of thing. But if I was to create a setting where I could alter people's minds or perceptions via chemicals, right, which we know medicine does that today. That's why we have so many psychotherapy drugs, right? The change of a chemical changes the way a brain operates. He could have explained it with pheromones. Do you know what I mean? Like, this person is evolved and they generate pheromones. We know that pheromones are a natural occurring thing in animals. So, yeah, going back to your point, if he'd have gone back and said, well, affecting someone else's thought processes, what they see, what they hear, even the thought in their head, which could be that sort of mind-link communication, but instead of me sending a radio signal to your brain, I've actually sent you a chemical signal via pheromones. You know what I mean? Like, it depends on which angle of science you're looking at. So
yeah, because one movie I really liked, I think it was in the early '90s. It was Scanners, and they would
80s.
make 80s.
Michael Ironside.
Yeah, they would make people's head explode, and that's different,
I remember seeing that
Matt
as a kid.
Stark, yeah, that was a great movie. Matt Stark says, "No way, Jose, that's superhero shit right there." So there's Matt Stark.
Well, I did mention just, the Legion of Superheroes at the start. It gave me that impression, so I could see what he. It's not far of a leap to make it. Superheroes either. Again, it's what you want in your game. Imagine putting superpowers in this game. You could play a Legion of Superheroes style.
Yeah.
And it's really what you want.
Rob Towell. No, psionics are only needed for science fantasy stuff like Star Wars. Hard science fiction should have scientific reason for what they do, and is almost always social commentary. Start tossing around superpowers and it becomes adventure fantasy as the writers look for what to use those cool new powers. Cough Babylon 5, which is a show I haven't watched, but that's
You haven't watched Babylon 5?
No.
I have to leave the show, Eric. I'm sorry. That is one of the coolest sci-fis ever.
I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me, but that's one of the inspiration noted in this book, Seven Worlds, Babylon 5, and Battlestar Galactica, which I really loved. The remake, at least, that was really good. I loved that. So I mean, thanks to everybody for answering my question. Unfortunately, we can't get to all of it, but as we mentioned...
Can I just get to one? Just one more, please.
One more.
So Terry Hansen, right? And the reason is, so he's gone hard sci-fi? No, I wouldn't for Psionics. Now, the Force, that's some hard sci-fi right there. All right, taking away that he's Terry, dude, you're my man. But that moment in episode 1 when is it Qui-Gon Jinn starts going, oh, he's got a midi-chlorine count, and they were trying to put science to the Force, and I'm like, oh, I'm out, dude. You've just killed it for me. The Force should have always been, that is fantasy, right? She's like, oh no, midi-chlorian count. Let's take a count. I'm like, piss off. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but it's just like,
yeah, and one more from Bradley Patterson. He says, "Call it what you want. Call it what you want. It's all hard sci-fi if you're doing it right." Gary knows what I'm talking about. Hard.
Yeah, he does hard piratery as well.
But yeah, we got a bunch of people that chime in on that, and apparently, well, obviously, people are divided on it. So let's conclude this. What I will say is, to really enjoy this book, I think we have to leave all those labels aside. Hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi. It doesn't matter. What it is I would call it a tour de force. It is a very good book. Would I run it? Probably not, but I definitely appreciate the effort that was put into that, the research, the toolbox aspect of this book, where if you feel that like your space combats are getting boring, you have tools in there to make it more interesting, to bring in the rest of the group into the space combat, not just the pilot. For someone like me who isn't really interested in researching science stuff, it's all been compiled in there, very well explained, in layman's words, in the sense that I could understand what he was saying, despite the fact that I'm not a science guy. So it is a dense book to read. But then again, if you're going to read this and use it, you're probably one of those brainy nerds, and this shouldn't be as difficult for you as it was for me. And as I mentioned previously, also, you're going to find everything that you would expect from a Savage World settings, from, new edges, hindrances, a bestiary, new spaceships, setting rules. The editing in there is tight. He knows his Savage Worlds. Although it's his first setting, he's written for Savage Worlds before. It's very well put together. I would remove maybe one notch about the artwork. I wasn't really a fan of the interior artwork, although he paid everything from his own pocket with the artwork.
That front cover, though.
Yeah, the
cover.
The cover is amazing, but what you find inside isn't the same thing. So that's all I will say. If I had to rate it, I would probably put a 9 out of 10 for this book. It is that good, and I remove one because subjective, it's not my thing, and like I said, the artwork, interior artwork. But the rest, it's amazing. It's a very well put together book, and although it is for deluxe, if you go on the website, you'll find a conversion document for SWADE, so you can play with SWADE as well. Like I said, there's a whole other book, the campaign guide, where you have a whole mega campaign in there. You have resources on the website, a 3D map. There's more too, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. So if you want more details to your sci-fi campaign, even if you're not going to play the campaign for this, you're going to find this book very useful. It's worth your time and money.
I agree with everything you've said. For me, someone that likes science fiction games, this is a must-have for your bookshelf. Even as you said, if you're not going to play it for what it is, just what you can mine out of it. Some of the artwork in the interior, I think the colored artwork doesn't do it for me, but those black and white ones, they immediately sparked, they sparked possibly the memories of when I first opened Star Frontiers. Right, I got a real nostalgia feel when I read it, when I saw those pictures, and I think the black and white ones do the best work in this book. As you said, the layout is tight. The way it's written, it's well written, irrespective of the times that we felt that we've said things about contradictions and stuff. There is so much that you can pull out of this document for your own. If you want to upgrade your last parsec games, or if you've converted Star Frontiers over, or Star Wars, whatever, that space combat system for capital ships, brilliant. Me personally, I do want to run this one day. I'd love to run those adventures. I just have to find the right people, and that's probably for me why it gets knocked down to a 9. Is it's just not universal. Because quality wise, it's certainly going up to that 10. There's that line that runs right through the book that that shows the distances between things, or tries to scale distance, which is really impressive. He did an amazing job, an absolutely amazing job. I'm 120% glad I backed it on the Kickstarter. I would love to see a SWADE version, although I'd probably recommend to the author not to. I just don't know if there's an audience big enough for it to do it again.
No,
I guess for those
I think
of us,
the conversion document is enough.
Yeah. So I disagree that I think you need to be a nerd to play this. I mean, maybe to its full potential. I don't see that pushing the glasses up the nose and no, that wouldn't happen kind of thing. But there's a lot in there that can be. If you like sci-fi of any kind and you're a Savage Worlds fan, as far as I'm concerned, this is a must get.
Yeah, I agree. Lewis came on the show. He was really passionate and knowledgeable about his stuff. And, these reviews for these settings from the Kickstarters were about finding out if they actually, put their money where their mouth was. Is that how it goes? But, he did it. Exactly as advertised, and then some. He did really good. So yeah, let's wrap this up. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us, you can write to us at the Wild Eye, all in one word, at gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, at the Wild Eye Podcast, while Twitter is just at the Wild Eye. And finally, Patreon, you can support us on there. Patreon.com/The Wild Eye.
Oh yeah, it's that time again. The part of the show where we spread a special kind of love on our patrons. This is a special Seven Worlds edition. Alan Bray, Bubbles, and Conrad Neubert, how'd you like to map my star charts? Cora Judd, Dan Brown, Daryl Cartier, I'm looking for a hand to polish my rocket. I meant spaceship. I think I'm forgetting to mention a patron. Who could it be? Oh well, must not be important. Frank Turfler, Gilda Lewenstrad, and Jan Yetma, we got new edges. You be easily cowed, and I'll be cocky. John Schronheim, John Peterson, and Carl Kiesler, let's pretend I'm a virgin and make first contact. Oh. Kevin Stanley, Manuel Sams, Mr. Stagg. It's hot enough in here to cook a German sausage. Let's vent some heat. Ray Arastia, Scott Marchland Davis, and Sean Richer. First expansion, second expansion. Let me show you my expansion. Stephen Dragonspawn, Sid the Squid, and Zovia's RPG maps. For a good time, call me on the Stellar Communication Network. Uncle J. Raz, Matt Stock, Rob Towell. Projectile clouds and beam weapons are cool, but check out my missiles payload. Oh, no need for that biodefense spray. And lastly, Andy Hall, I want to be your rotovator plane. Look it up. Thank you all for your patronage to make these crazy little jingles, these little sexy things of love happen. From the bottom of my parts, I mean heart. We truly appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Gary. We're supposed to laugh because it's always hilarious. Even last time I told Gary that it was quite raunchy, the last one. So we'll see if he takes it down a notch. But yeah, this is Eric's. Well, I hope you enjoy that review. A bit different, but I kind of like having that conversation with someone else instead of just saying, this is what I found out, and then people just trying to tack on commentary on top of that. I like talking to you about it because your sci-fi better, and then explaining what I went through, and you would say, well, this, not devil's advocate, but kind of maybe sharing insight into what you think the author might have wanted to do at that point. So
I'd love to have a discussion with you about fantasy tropes and different kinds of fantasy, because I realized the other day that I'm very boring when it comes to my fantasy. I'm so locked into that D&D medieval sort of English style of fantasy that I try branching out, especially lately now that I've had that realization, but I realize that the majority of my thinking when it comes to fantasy is very linear, and that frightened me when I had that thought. So maybe one day we can do that. That'd be cool. Yeah,
well, we'll see with the upcoming reviews. I know we still have a couple left from the Kickstarter interviews. We've got Retribution from Albatron Production. I believe Gary will do that one. And we also have Frozen Skies, and that will be from Harrison when he comes back. I think that will wrap up all the products that were out from those Kickstarters. And then I would like to just move on to purely SWADE settings, if more can actually come out. Right now we only have Crystal Heart, I believe, and we reviewed that one already, but hopefully there's more coming out where we can actually look at them through the lens of SWADE, because
can I put my name down for like Saints and Sinners when that comes out?
Sure.
I'm hanging for that Kickstarter. Yeah, that one. And I heard that Wiggly's looking at doing Hellfrost for SWADE. I got really excited by it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do that. But for now, this is Eric saying, reach for the stars.
Wow, that's brilliant. Just reach for the stars. Yeah, this is Paris saying, can I come too?
Sure.
Have a good one, guys.
Goodbye.
The Wild Eye Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Die Podcast.